25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Beautiful day, really. I think the rest of the country is having a hard time, though. I think we we lucked out again. This has happened more than once in the last couple of years, right?
So.
Well, you look at the weather map, and the whole country's got something going on in Florida. Beautiful. I don't know what the thing is there. All right. You know what I read this morning is that the most expensive place to live in this country is here in Florida.
Uh-huh.
It's not Silicon Valley anymore. It's not Manhattan anymore. It's that little island off of Miami called, what's it called again?
Key Biscayne?
No, not Key Biscayne. Right near Key Biscayne, though.
Oh, my gosh. Fisher Island.
Fisher Island, yeah. Which has nothing at all to do with our next guest. Anna Yen is on the phone. She is a humorist. She held executive positions at a wide range of tech companies. She spearheaded investor relations for Tesla Motors. Wow, that's impressive. MarketWatch, Pixar Animation Studios. She worked directly with Silicon Valley's most respected icons that include the late Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, who wants to send us to Mars, David Drummond, Larry Kramer, a managing director at Ellipsis, and she's written this book called Sophia of Silicon Valley. It's a novel drawn from her own experiences. Wow, this is an honor.
She's amazing.
Good morning, Anna. How are you?
Good morning.
Where are you?
I'm currently in Pittsburgh on one of the stops for my book tour.
Oh,
okay.
nice.
Okay. Well, when you come to Florida, you got to go to Fisher Island. It's the most expensive place to live in the world.
I heard that. I've never been to Fisher Island, but I'm sure it's beautiful.
Never been there either. So tell me about the book, Sophia of Silicon Valley. Why is it Sophia and not Anna?
That's a good question. It is Sophia because it's a fictionalized story, and I've always loved the name Sophia, so I gave the character that name. If I had a daughter, I would have named her Sophia.
This is your daughter. When you write a book, that's your child, right?
Yes, she is my baby. That's right.
So tell me about I don't mean to include your whole career, but I mean the stuff that you put into the book. What kind of things, and how did you keep it funny? How did you keep it light?
The book is about a young woman in her 20s that's trying to navigate her way through Silicon Valley, which which has been my stomping ground for the last 20 years, and when you go through, when you're writing about it, you look at my career, and I've worked and engaged with this crazy cast of quirky characters who you really look at, and if you could just take a step back and, step away from the stress of it all, these are incredible people that could sometimes be so... the situations were so outlandish and insane that you just had to laugh, or you could just break down crying. You just never have survived. So you really had to have a sense of humor, at least in my role, to make it through.
And some of the funny events in there is about the dating scene.
Yes. Well, I have a funny story about that. San Francisco and Silicon Valley is pretty small. And it got to the point where I was in an elevator bank in the Transamerica building on my way up to a very important meeting. And I'm dressed in a power suit and all this. And I'm waiting for the elevator, and there's another guy looking at me. And he keeps looking at me, and I said, "Oh, do I know you? Are you going to this meeting?" And he says, "No, I've taken you out a couple times. We've been on dates." And I'm thinking, oh, geez, it's really bad when you don't recognize the people you've gone out with. I mean, you just churn through them, and dating is really hard in Silicon Valley. It really is.
Wow. And yet Silicon Valley is where we get all these apps from, isn't it? The Tinder and all those other things.
Yeah, Tinder actually, I don't know if it started in Silicon Valley, but, the premise is still there. But yeah. I don't know if I call Tinder a dating site per se.
So did you go through a period of your life when you were battling cancer?
I did. I was diagnosed with cancer during an incredibly stressful time in my Silicon Valley career. Yes, that was a real bummer.
And in the book, you let us know about that. Of course, I wasn't sure it was you, to be honest, but now that I know, but you let us know about some of the conversations in your head when you have cancer, and I found that really interesting. And you want to be your big brother or something. You want to be somebody who can say, "Come on, you have to live your life."
Right. Well, I'm not saying my method is the best one, but it certainly worked for me. I'm not the type of person. I know myself well enough to know that I could go into a complete mental sort of black hole if I was, to quit my job and travel, or start up yoga and just really try to enjoy my life. That's some people do that when they're diagnosed with something so serious. But for me, the important thing to get through it was to push on. I've been raised in this family where if you have a problem, you just got to get to the next step, right? Don't think about where you're trying to go. You have to think about what you have to do now.
Yeah.
And it's very much been a guiding principle in my career at the law firm. You bill your hours in 6-minute increments, for God's sake.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was just, those are that's the dialogue I had in my head. If I started to feel myself get out of control, I would say, all right, 6-minute increments. And I had to keep myself busy, which is, I actually helped co-found my first startup out of the hospital bed.
Oh, my.
Wow. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Silicon Valley in Saratoga.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
So like, you're in Pittsburgh now. Is it that? Yeah. Did you feel like it was different? And now that you are like not there, do you feel like you were right about it being different in Silicon Valley? I mean.
Well, when you grow up somewhere, at the time Silicon Valley was orchards and very middle income. It was quite low key. We didn't lock the doors. I mean, it was a great small town. And, even though our fathers were the ones building Motorola at the time, and we really didn't understand or know it. So to us, it was a great place to grow up. I can't say, I think it would be hard growing up in Silicon Valley now. I mean, I see my nieces and nephews going through it. It's incredibly competitive, and it's filled with money. So kids don't necessarily blink when they step on a private jet. It's really kind of unfortunate. We've lost that.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, we've really lost that.
Well, and the people in your industry, profession is maybe a better word than industry, but they are the rock stars of your generation. They're the movie stars, and et cetera. I mean, you guys are the ones who we're all looking to.
That's right. Right. They were our Hollywood. And
maybe that's what the rest of us can better understand it if we think of it in those terms.
Yes. I think that's a great way to look at it. Growing up, hearing about people like Steve Jobs, who created the computer that we were using in school, or people like Larry Ellison, who seemed so glamorous and wealthy, and he was like everybody knew where he lived, and it was like that drive that you can do in Hollywood, the homes of the stars or something.
How do you know, how does each individual person know where their individual identity lies, and they're just not doing things that they feel they're expected to do, and they're clones of somebody else?
Well, I think I don't know if they actually do know, is the thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, it does. It's confusing.
And that's the way it is in Hollywood too. They don't always know. In fact, they have no clue what the real world is like.
That's right.
Or the rest of the world is like. Well, and sometimes I think as Americans, it's kind of that way too, because when you hear of other people in other countries, even the poorest among us, and I know there are exceptions to this, but as a general rule, the poorest among us is doing better than than an average citizen in many countries.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are so lucky in the Valley, and sometimes you asked about keeping humor. You really have to look back on what's going on there, and you have to stay grounded. You really have to be able to laugh at it, because these people don't even know where to spend their money.
And you have the a female in the middle of your story, and then you have these fellas that are entrepreneurs, and then they're reaching out into the movie production industry and animation studio, and then one comes up with the question, do we need the money or don't we? And I thought that was pretty profound.
Right. Well, I mean, nobody. Look, I'm so lucky to be in Silicon Valley, and I love it there. And I think the people there are so incredibly smart and interesting. And I see a lot of people, having these self-realization moments and really trying to expand their worlds beyond just the technology of what we're doing in Silicon Valley. So I applaud all those people that are exploring other interests. But the money is a part of it, and none of us want to think that it's important. Everybody wants to think that they're doing something because they're interested in it or they're passionate about it. And I talk to a lot of people in their 20s and 30s now who are kind of struggling with realizing they may not be happy in their jobs, but they don't know what to do because the money's really important. I mean, they're really having that sort of struggle of what to do next in their life, and they're so young. But you do come to this realization, are you doing this for the money?
So do you as a woman have, and through your character Sophia, does she have an experience different than the male counterpart would have because of being
well? Right, Sophia, and this is certainly true for me as well. There is no doubt that Sophia has a very Cinderella career through Silicon Valley. I mean, her mouth and her sort of direct opinions that are often unsolicited get her into trouble. But for the most part, she's working for these tech geniuses that are revered by their peers. Right. And therefore, if they're treating her well, everybody else does. And that was certainly my case. I was really protected. It's not to say, though, that I haven't had experiences or witnessed, where behavior is really inappropriate. So I don't think Sophia's journey has been typical. I think it's been unique, in fact, and I think it's been an opportunity that very, very few people can or ever will have. But that's partly why you want to write the book. You want to present a perspective that other people don't necessarily have the opportunity to have.
Oh, you talk about separation in the job place. There's a moment when Sophia's talking and she's on one side of the office and the other people are on the other side of the office. They really don't have a lot in common. And I think that's being addressed now in the real world. My son works in a large office in Manhattan. And every Friday at 4 o'clock, everybody stops working and then they have an area there where they just kind of mingle with each other just to chat. So everybody's familiar with everybody else. And I think that's a really good idea.
It's a great idea. And I think you have to be proactive about it because it's very easy to be isolated, particularly I think as you go up in a company and become part of, for example, the executive team, you really have to make an effort to socialize with everybody. Because it's too easy to say, I'm really busy, I'm traveling or whatever, and you don't go to the company happy hour and, meet your peers. It's important, but it really does take an effort, and we have to make that.
It's a good story about the culture of what life must be like for those in Silicon Valley. Kat, I wanted to ask you about the business model. Is the
of what?
Of the industry that
of publishing? Yeah, don't ask me about that.
The business model that comes out of Silicon Valley, is it technology driven or is it business model driven? For example, again, maybe my question is hard to understand. In our business, in radio, ratings are everything, and yet there are some radio that doesn't need ratings. They're supported by the government, unless Donald Trump gets his way, I guess.
Yeah.
And NPR, for example. And I don't know that happens in the Silicon Valley world. It's almost always has to be something that sells. Otherwise, the ship sinks, right?
Well, in an ideal world, yes, that's how you would think it would be. But there's a tremendous amount of money available to people with ideas. And it doesn't come just from Silicon Valley. People all over the world now are very interested in investing in the new next big thing, right? And much of it does get generated, these ideas, in the Valley. So there is a lot of money that is accessible by entrepreneurs. And I think unfortunately, a lot of the ones that get started don't always think through the business model of how am I going to make money, right? Or they're not necessarily realistic of what the first important milestone is. Like, for example, you start an app, right? And you think, oh, I've got a great idea for an app. The big joke, 7 years ago was, oh, I have an app. Right, everyone was like, "Oh, I'm building an app."
Right.
And the what people didn't realize is to really make money or at least survive, you actually had to hit 1 million downloads very quickly, and people think, "Oh, 1 million is easy," because we hear such outrageous numbers from companies like Facebook or Pinterest, and they're growing like mad, right? But the amount of money it actually takes to get to 1 million users, I mean, it's really, really hard, and people don't understand that.
See, that's something we wouldn't know as the average person, yeah.
It takes a tremendous amount of effort and money. The other thing is that the ultimate ones that survive actually have a business model. The Dropbox IPO was amazing. I mean, that's a great company because they actually took the time to build a foundation of having a great business model.
Your book is written in the first person, and I really enjoyed reading it because you have different scenarios and conversations come up, but then you italicize the thoughts of the main character. And to me, that made it such a more enjoyable read because she's saying something and then she's thinking, oh, I have to say this, or, how is this going to float? And then I just think it was very ingenious of you.
Thank you. I actually, those really are my thoughts that go through my head a lot. And the problem for me, let's be clear, I've been fired a lot. And the problem for me is I italicize them in the book, but they actually often come out of my mouth. And then I get in a lot of trouble.
That's too funny. Tell me about your relationship with the older members of your family, your mom, perhaps, and I don't know if that is transferable to Sophia. But like when you're running into circumstances and you don't know who else to talk to, and it's got nothing to do with technology and everything to do with just human existence, who was your go-to?
Right.
Who did you go to?
So my family did have a big influence in who I am today. But I usually, as much as I don't want to admit it, my mother and her brainwashing probably had the most to do with how I got through the stress of my job and why I was able to be successful. Because to be clear, my mother is crazy. Like she is the most irrational person you've ever met. But she's lovely. She has no idea that she's being irrational. She's just being her. And so my personal career has been centered around working for these maestros, right? But what makes me stick out is that a lot of people didn't survive working for these people, but I could do it because my mother is irrational. I'm not calling the characters in the book irrational, but they are a little quirky and they can be demanding.
You know what I find interesting on Amazon? You're number 28 in Asian American, which I guess I can understand that. But you're number 291 in psychological. Does that surprise you? I mean, that's a high number, even though 291 in the record world, I guess nowadays doesn't make much. But I mean, out of millions of books, you're number 291 in the psychological category.
Wow, that's. I actually haven't looked at Amazon. I was told not to.
yeah, probably a good idea.
But it was driving me crazy. But
I guess you're doing really well. But I'm just surprised at the category.
No, that surprises me a lot. But I'm actually thrilled to hear that, though, because really the book is meant to inspire and give people hope. That is one of the themes. It's about overcoming challenges. And, all the titles originally for the manuscript, my editor said they all sound like self-help books. So that's really interesting that you bring that up. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
But it should be in the humor category. Are you the voice on the audiobook?
No. I would have liked to have been, but the bottom line was that I was awful.
And you
I tried.
And you also evoke the emotion of standing up for oneself. I mean, there's one issue in the book where the fella is having the president over for dinner, and she kind of sees right through it, and she asks him, "What do you want?" And he tries to dance around it, but in the end, he tells her.
That's right. And then you can make the decision of whether you want to participate or not.
Exactly.
Right. It probably wasn't the politically correct thing to do as for my career, but I'm not going to go serve someone dinner. Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah, that was great. I applauded the character. That was wonderful.
Well, you are a fun guest. And again, thank you so much for being on the show with us. I found the book on Amazon. It is called Sophia of Silicon Valley. Do you have a website you want to direct us to?
It's AnnaYen.net.
AnnaYen.net. Okay, very good.
ANNAYEN.net.
AnnaYen.net.
Yeah. And
yes.
Anna,
thank you both, Larry and Robin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. I'm sorry, I put an extra A in your name. AnnaYen.net. Got it now. Okay, thank you, Anna.
Take care.
All right, we'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Chris Foster. President Trump tweets it was his honor to fire FBI Director James Comey, calling him a weak and untruthful slimeball.
Comey, in his new book out next week, describes President Trump as untethered to the truth and ego-driven. In excerpts of the book, Comey described the Trump presidency as a forest fire and wrote that his interactions with the administration recalled his earlier career as a prosecutor against the mob.
Fox's John Decker. A 16-year-old boy in Cincinnati called 911 twice to